on GoToWebinar to make sure that everybody has everything all set and everything's working for you. So first of all, this is what you should be seeing on your screen. On the left is the GoToWebinar viewer, where you are going to see the presentation itself. On the right is the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can use that section to raise your hand, to ask questions, and to select the audio mode that you want to listen in. That panel may collapse when you're not using it. You can just click on it to open up again, or you can go through the View menu to uncheck Auto Hide Control Panel if you want it to stay open all the time. Now you have two options for listening to us today. You can listen either through the telephone or through your mic and speakers. If you have any sound problems with one of the selections, just go ahead and try the other one. And we may well be able to help you with any technological issues you may encounter. Just send us a chat message and we'll try and fix any problems that are occurring. All of the attendees are going to be in listen-only mode, so you're going to be muted on the call, but we really are interested in your input and your questions nonetheless. So you can use the questions box over in that right-hand section to ask questions for the speakers for the Q&A portion of the webinar, and we hopefully will be able to get to those and answer them if there's time at the end. You can also look in the same area for important links to materials the speakers are referencing or other resources that come up during the discussion. We are recording today's webinar, so if you want to share it with colleagues or if there was something that you missed that you want to hear again, you will be able to do so. You can just head over to our website, and this webinar, along with all of our others, are available free there. You go click on the resources header and then select webinars in the left-hand menu, and we'll have today's webinar there in about 48 hours or so. And now for our speakers. We have a large and really excellent group of speakers here today, and we're so excited to hear from them. So let me introduce the first two speakers, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. Michelle Lieberman is going to be the first speaker today. She is our Technical Assistance Manager here at the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. She provides technical assistance through our consulting program to local communities around the country that are looking to improve their built environment and their Safe Routes to School initiatives. Michelle also works on publications and other resources, helps with local and state campaigns, and runs webinars and trainings. And her background is in urban planning and public health. We will then be hearing from Seth LaJeunesse, who is the Associate Director of the National Center for Safe Routes to School, a different organization than the Safe Routes to School National Partnership, and also a Research Associate with the University of North Carolina's Highway Safety Research Center. Seth manages a school transportation database, provides evaluation-oriented consulting, designs impact evaluation studies, performs data analysis, and he has a master's degree in city and regional planning from UNC. Michelle is going to speak a little bit about the report that we recently completed and highlight some lessons about what the report reveals about how data relates to Safe Routes to School. And then Seth is going to talk about some new data collection opportunities from the National Center for Safe Routes to School. And handing it over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Sarah. And let me pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, so as Sarah said, we recently released this report on Safe Routes to School and data accessibility, and I will push out a link to that in a little bit. So I really want to share with you today what we learned while developing the report. So I'll start by saying that Safe Routes to School programs and initiatives at the local, regional, state, federal, all sorts of things across the country are already using data in some manner, and data has already played an important role in Safe Routes to School. Data is really a key part of one of the original 5 E's of the federal Safe Routes to School program, evaluation. And so over a period of time, we've collected a lot of data. We've collected information to create walking route maps that may look like this in your community with the picture on the left side. Safe Routes to School has used data to evaluate programs, to advocate for funding, to support kids safely walking and biking to school. But oftentimes, it's been done with limited resources, and communities and organizations working on Safe Routes to School have had limited time, money, and staff with the special skills or technology that data has always kind of needed in the past. And these limitations have often kind of limited us on how much we would can do versus what we'd like to do in terms of collecting data or doing complex analyses or even providing information back to the communities. But we're really in a time where technology is rapidly changing, and it's really changing the way we collect, store, and analyze data. Now we have things like really super high-speed computers. We've got smartphones. We've got digitizers. We've got mobile apps and automatic bike counters. All these things are allowing more data to be collected today than ever before. And technology is really improving our capacity to store and analyze data, bring together data from different sources, and disseminate information back out to communities. And these are really things that are creating opportunities to make data more accessible. So while in the past we've typically seen that just researchers and kind of technical experts were the ones interacting with data, there's a lot more broader community access now, and with a lot of benefits for Safe Routes to School, including being able to inform decision making, making the case for stronger funding proposals, and then really the ability for better on-the-ground implementation. So there's a lot of power in data and the new technology that's coming out. And I would have to say that Safe Routes to School, I think as a whole movement, we haven't harnessed this to the extent that others have. So I think we'll hear a lot on this webinar today about ways to do that. So looking at the key ways of using data for Safe Routes to School, we kind of found 5 sort of key categories of things that people are doing or could be doing more of. So first is making the case for investment at all levels. So especially important at the local level to help local decision makers understand that it's worth investing the time and resources into Safe Routes to School. Also important in showing funders the potential to kind of possibilities that are out there and providing them with the numbers and statistics that are really showing how likely we're going to be to achieve these goals through Safe Routes to School. And then at the state and federal levels, data is really playing a big role in making the case for keeping funding going to show the results that Safe Routes to School has had, and also where the needs are still out there. The second, prioritizing schools and neighborhoods. When we're working with limited resources, data really helps us understand where it may be best to put those resources to either maximize benefits or to address neighborhoods and students who have the need for our resources the most. Integrating Safe Routes to School in transportation and land use planning. Data on students and families and the trip to school can really help inform larger community plans, whether it be bicycle or pedestrian or transportation plans or plans for citing schools, and making sure that Safe Routes to School is kind of integrated into the information that is feeding into these plans and helping inform those plans. Another key way to use data, planning and developing programs from helping to inform the strategies that are being chosen to tailoring those strategies to be appropriate and the most impactful for the community. And then finally evaluating programs. So using data to understand what's happening, what the results are, where there may need to be modifications, and then also being able to share those results and kind of add to promoting the continuation of the Safe Routes to School and all the good work. So what have we seen in terms of kind of historical data usage and collection around Safe Routes to School? So typically we've seen student travel tallies done and online and paper surveys of parents to kind of understand what are the current walking and biking behaviors of students and families. Also, doing observations and walk audits and documenting existing conditions in terms of infrastructure and also behaviors around the schools, doing interviews and collecting kind of information from parents, students, other stakeholders, and a lot of times relying on secondary data. Well, whether it be data collected by health departments or for other studies that kind of help us understand the realm around Safe Routes to School. But there have been a lot of challenges. So like I said before, limited resources to collect data. Oftentimes these limited resources really make it hard for a community to collect data or collect data consistently. There have been minimal local data sharing opportunities, so we collect data locally, but really no easy ways to share the data either between communities or even up to the state and national level, so we can do a larger evaluation across the country. And then finally, there's some national surveys, like the National Household Travel Survey, that have been collecting data, nationally around behaviors. But oftentimes we don't have the sample sizes for kids traveling to school to understand things really at the fine grained local level that can help local communities. So the majority of the report really dives into strategies and roles of different groups to make data more accessible and more usable for Safe Routes to School. So we've included sort of 4 groups of people. First being government, the second being research, and this includes universities, independent research centers, and other large organizations, private sector, and then community organizations and community members. And so I'm going to go into each of these and to really talk about there's opportunities for partnerships, I think, between different groups in Safe Routes to School, practitioners, and advocates. And while we don't want to really get rid of what we're doing before in terms of data collection and usage, we really can take advantage of new technology and openness of data and the amount of data out there through these strategies. So first one, government. Many cities and counties are providing open data portals and just making data available to those who want it out there on the web. So I'm going to kind of speak from the role of maybe a Safe Routes to School practitioner who's trying to get data. Going to your local jurisdictions and seeing if that data is available and what you can do with it. Also possibly, a lot of times we don't have the ability to analyze or process data, so seeing if those government agencies can assist with some level of processing analysis. One of the things that's really beneficial is being able to convert data into maps if it's geography-based. So this example on the right is a proximity map from Ohio, where the State Department of Transportation takes the addresses that are just provided in a spreadsheet by the schools for all the student locations, and then the Department of Transportation actually maps it into this proximity map that shows where students are living in proximity to the school. And the schools can use this for their school travel plans, as well as developing programs and prioritizing routes. And then finally here, government is collecting a lot of data, so having partnerships between Safe Routes to School and government agencies, so that way Safe Routes to School is included in the future data collection. So things that may be helpful for Safe Routes to School programs, making sure those are kind of included if it's an easy kind of add-on to what's already being done. Roles for research, and again, we included universities, research organizations, and large nonprofits. Organizations that are already collecting a lot of data. Really encouraging continuing to share findings. Again, converting data into maps if it's appropriate to do that, and then possibly acting as a local data intermediary. And I think it'd be great if every community had one of these. These intermediaries really just are the knowledge base. They are the groups that have the and the skills to collect and share and process data. And they can really help community members kind of bridge that gap between having data and doing something to use them. So roles for private sector, there's a lot of things I think we'll hear about later, expanding partnerships with the private sector to kind of harness developers, software developers, and innovation to expand partnerships that are already happening in transportation and healthcare and other sectors to include Safe Routes to School. And then roles for community organizations and community members. There's a lot of free and online tools out there. One of the fact sheets that we put out with the report has tips for safe routes to school practitioners on easy and free ways to get data and tools on the web. So I think those are great for community members as well. And then the link to the report and the fact sheets, I'll ask Molly to put out the report here. It's on our website, has a lot more detail. I really encourage you to take a look at the larger report. And then the 2 fact sheets, we have one that's geared towards safe routes to school practitioners, and then one geared towards government, primarily local government, working with safe routes to school to make data more accessible and usable. Here's my contact information, and I'm going to turn it over to Seth to talk about the National Center's data system, and it's been one of the key tools for safe routes to school in terms of data collection and storage. He's going to talk about what's coming up.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And let me just make a plug again for the By the Numbers report. It's wonderful. It's a really great synthesis of all that's out there on accessible data, and it's amazing what's happened in the last few years with data and what's available. What I want to talk about today, and thank you very much to Cass and Margot and Sarah and Michelle for being flexible to allow me and the National Center for Safe Routes to School to kind of jump in here and talk about some of the things that we're doing with the National Center's data system. I'm going to talk about kind of 2 elements of it. One is going to be more about the openness of it. It's not totally open, as many of you might know, but I'm going to talk about the open elements of it, and then transition to what is coming up. What are the changes that we're going to be making to the data system in the next few months? So just as a brief history, we developed this in 2007. It was through an agreement with FHWA to say, what can we do to help monitor what's happening across the country? So to our knowledge, this is the only centralized and standardized means of monitoring school travel trends. And this was made possible with our agreement with the Federal Highway Administration. We wanted to really track what's happening at the local level and then be able to roll it up to higher levels, to county levels, and to districts, to states, and to nationally. So you might be familiar with these data collection instruments. On the left you have the parent survey that relates to parents' perceptions about walking and biking to school, and then other barriers that they might see as part of that, how far away they live from school, and what's the typical mode that their children take to get to school. On the right we have the student travel tally, which is basically a classroom show of hands. Many of you again might be familiar with this, and it's just a quick and easy way to get a sense of how kids are getting to and from school. So as of this month, I ran some numbers here, and it looks like right now we have about 1.4 million parent surveys in the data system, 317,000 travel tallies. Now the tallies are at the classroom level, so that represents 317,000 classrooms, and that's from about 14,000 schools in all states and DC. The data system is open to the extent that anybody can sign up, create an account on saferoutesdata.org. And one of the things that you're kind of encouraged to do at first is to just look to see who is collecting data in your state, or you can select any state really. So here I have an example, Ocracoke, which is on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. You can see when you search for them and select that school, you can see that they've collected on the right there tallies, and they've selected surveys. And then you can drill in a little bit farther and see which form they use. So it looks like they have surveys. They collected them September 2014, and they collected about 102 of them, if you look there. After this, basically, it's whoever signed up first and added Ocracoke School that you then would have to request access to. This was basically kind of in the agreement we had with the Federal Highway Administration, that the data that are in our the data system are owned by the state departments of transportation. And so basically, when people want to access, say, Ohio's data, as Michelle showed earlier, those maps, those wonderful maps, basically you have to go to the coordinator there, Julie Walkoff, and say, hey, can I access school travel data in Ohio? And she would then grant you access to that. But users in the system, whoever gets there first essentially and adds data for specific schools, they can allow others to access the data, to download reports, to view and edit. Reports are like these. The travel tallies basically show that mode split to and from school. So this is kind of a snapshot of what those look like. The parent surveys kind of have an additional element of looking at some of the issues that might prevent some students to walk and bike to school. So you have an example here of that from a parent survey report. And then also we have the ability to compare 2 time periods with the travel tally. So it's standardized by grade, so grade doesn't have an influence on the results. And you see if there's been an increase or how walking, biking, using the car, riding in the bus has shifted over time. This gives an example of kind of program evaluation. So basically that's the system now. Right now we're developing some changes. We're making some changes to the system. And the 2 main ones are that we're going paperless, not unlike your electricity bill. You get maybe online now that when you used to get paper. We're definitely coming up with the times now and going paperless. And also mobile friendly, with the understanding that a lot of people might not even have access to PCs right now, but a lot of them do have mobile devices that they can use. Paper forms, so it's not actually paperless necessarily, it's that we will not be dealing with paper after a certain point. Paper will still be available for those who need to use that service. I will say that after November 15, we will make the official kind of transition over to a paperless where we will not receive the paper forms to process. But they will still be inputted. You can still input them at saferoutesdata.org, and it'll be much easier to do when we transition over to the mobile-friendly system. So what this also means is that right now, if you want an online parent survey, you go through a request channel. So you go in and you create a survey set, and then you ask us, hey, can you create a link for our parent survey? We create a link, and then we share it to you. Soon you'll be able to do that yourself without us being the middleman, which will be nice. And then also soon we're developing an online classroom tally. We've been hearing this for several years now, and we're finally have the ability to start developing this, and so that online, on a tablet, on a smartphone, we can start doing the tallies. The mobile-friendly data entry, again, will make it a lot easier to do online. So these are just some of the changes that are coming online. We're working on them right now, and we look to really start finalizing this as we enter kind of the school year. So with that, I just want to thank the partnership again for inviting me to speak with you all today. Here's my contact information. And with that, I'm going to transition it back to Sarah.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much, Seth and Michelle. It was great to get a sense of what's happening with data and with Safe Routes to School and where data collection and access systems are going. So let me move now into introducing our next three speakers. We're going to start off hearing from Erin Barbaro, who is a consultant to the Institute for People, Place, and Possibility, IP3. Erin had previously spent 13 years at the Center for Applied Research in Environmental Systems, CARES, at the University of Missouri as a senior Geographic Information Systems Specialist and Assistant Director. Erin played a lead role in the development of online data and collaboration tools such as Community Commons, which I think we'll be hearing more about, and has a Master of Arts in Geography from the University of Missouri. We're then going to be hearing from Paul Mackey, who is the Communications Director at Mobility Lab, where he's been since 2012. He there works on reporting, writing, editing, helping journalists, and speaking about how places can become really vibrant through public transportation initiatives. And prior to joining Mobility Lab, he was the Climate Change Communications Director at the Nature Conservancy and Director of Media Relations at the World Resources Institute. And we're very honored to have Paul currently serving on our Safe Routes to Healthy Foods Task Force here at the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. And we will then transition to Nick Sims, who is the Assistant Vice President, not Vice Principal, Assistant Vice President of Early Childhood Education and Healthy Communities at the United Way of Central Alabama. Nick works there specifically with the Success by 6 Help Me Grow and Safe Routes initiatives, and has an MPA that he earned from University of Alabama, Birmingham in 2008 that is focused on community development and planning. So Erin's going to start us off here with an overview of some of the larger issues and opportunities related to data collection and sharing. Paul's going to talk about data innovations in the bigger transportation world, and then Nick is going to dig down a little bit and talk about a partnership between the City of Birmingham and United Way that resulted in being able to support Safe Routes to School through data collection and usage. So turn it over to you, Erin.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share a little bit about Community Commons, just a quick overview, and really wanted to talk about how it could potentially be a resource for some of this case making, in particular, you know, as you're looking for grant application and trying to make the case for investment, as well as potentially prioritizing different schools and neighborhoods where your work can be focused. Would really like to just kind of talk about the Community Commons as a resource for that type of thing. We have lots of demographic and social data. It's a free resource that you can jump in and use today, and we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. And certainly look forward to continued partnership with all of you in figuring out ways that we can try to fill some of the data gaps that might be out there, or at least help with some of the data gap advocacy work that needs to go on. So with that, I'll just go ahead and jump in. So I'm here on the website, communitycommons.org, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some resources that are here so that you can have something to play with after you get off the phone. One thing just to point out is this Maps and Data area. This is where I would like to start here. So the Community Commons does require a registration. It's a free registration to use the tools. But once you've done that, you can come in and access some of our reporting tools. And I'd like to focus here first. So we have a report tool that provides about 137 different indicators for every county in the nation, as well as you can create reports for smaller geographic areas using this custom area tool. So that might be a school district you're looking to partner with, or a city, or even a neighborhood that you'd like to draw on the map and see what data is available in that area. So I'm just going to select a county real quick. So I'm located in Missouri here, so let's go ahead and select Missouri, and then I will go ahead and go into a little bit more urban area than I'm in. We'll go look at the St. Louis area. Whoops. Okay, so we'll look at St. Louis City, and perhaps we'd like to also look at St. Louis County. And then we can go ahead and view reports. So just to point out, you can create sort of a regional view, look at the larger multi-county area if you'd like. And what you get after you create a report area is data presented across six different data categories. So everything from demographics, social and economic factors, physical environment, all the way leading to health outcomes. And so we'll take a look at just a few of these indicators so that you get a flavor as to what's here. Under the demographics tab, you can see that we have a whole bunch of different data indicators. I know one of the things that came out in the report is that everyone's time and money are quite limited. So what we hope is to be able to provide a way so that you can quickly access data without having to go out and recreate it yourself. So we try to keep everything updated on an ongoing basis so you can come to us as a resource for some of this secondary data. Here, the first item we're looking at is total population, but perhaps you're looking at something more like total families with children as you're looking around walking and biking to school. So you can click on this, and that's going to refresh this page. And with each of the data that we collect, we present it in a number of different ways. As a text paragraph here, where the data or the items in the paragraph change based on the data presented. We also present the data as a table. And you can see here I picked two counties, St. Louis County, or St. Louis City, which is a county, it's kind of confusing, and then St. Louis County. And we can actually look at those two items separately, but also combined. So if we were looking at more of a regional approach, it summarizes the data for you here. And then we present the data as a map. So you can also see how that item is distributed or how that data is distributed across your region. And then wherever possible, we break down the data by age, race, gender, and ethnicity. And you can hover over these items to learn more about the data that are here. And then finally, on every page, we have detailed footnotes about where the data comes from, how recent it is, and any other additional calculations or analysis we've done to modify that. So I'm just going to show you a couple other ones. One that you guys might be interested in is here in the health behaviors area and the health outcomes. Again, when you're thinking about case making the case for investment, some of these charts and graphs can be quite powerful in terms of speaking to a city council or a school district and trying to advocate for funding. So for example, here we have something around physical inactivity. You can take a look at the report area here and see a data gauge comparing your region with the state and the nation. Walking and biking to work might be another one that would be of interest to you. If you browse down here, you can see the data is presented, and you can see how the data varies across the different counties and whether or not that's above or below the state average. And then lastly, health outcomes, just to point out. So of course, this is the kind of the end goal, I think, for all of us, is to improve health outcomes across our different communities. Of course, many other wonderful, positive outcomes coming from walking and biking to school. But one of the ones that you may want to use as a case making is around obesity, diabetes rates, et cetera. So that kind of information can also be found here and can help with that case making. I'll just also point out that within this entire report, there's a couple things I just want to make sure you know. One of them is the save and download. So as I try to think about how you might use these tools for your case making and your prioritization, you can download this entire report in a Word document or a PDF document. I find the Word document just really handy though, because you can grab it all and it's completely yours at that point. You can cut and paste items, drop it into your PowerPoint presentations, your grant applications, etc. So being able to download it into Word can offer up some additional flexibility for you to really customize it as well. Many of the groups we work with will download this into Word, take all of that secondary data, and fold in their local information, photos, narrative quotes from students and teachers and parents. So you can kind of consider this as some boilerplate information that you can then use what you need and what you like and remove the rest and add in new information. Beyond the data that you see here, we also have, of course, our mapping tool. And you can access the mapping tool a couple of different ways. We were looking before, let me just jump over to, let's say we're looking at focusing or prioritizing areas, prioritizing a walking and biking to school program with areas in the community that have limited English proficiency. And perhaps that's where we really want to focus. So we can open this up and view it as a larger map. So many of you who have been familiar with the community commons and some of the data that we've had over time, this sort of mapping tool has been one that's been around for quite a while, but we continue to update the information. While there's 137 different indicators in that report tool, the data that you can access in the mapping tool is many thousands of different indicators across a wide range of topics. Everything from the built environment, civil and social topics, looking at housing data, economic data around poverty, tax statistics, etc. So let's say, for example, we're looking at finding areas or locations in the community where schools are located. Perhaps we really want to focus on schools that have a high free and reduced price lunch program. Perhaps that's one of the requirements for the grant that we're looking for. We can search for that data and just add it to our map. So while we started with the report, we can continue to customize our map here to create new images, again, to continue to make that case. So what we are looking at is the locations of schools shaded by the percent of students eligible for free and reduced price lunch, where the darker orange-red color indicates a higher percentage eligible for free and reduced price lunch. And then below that, you can see that we have areas shaded based on the census tract and the number or the percent of population with a limited English proficiency. So if, for example, our grant was focusing on both areas with high limited English proficiency and a high percent of students eligible for free and reduced price lunch, we could kind of narrow that down visually here and learn more about those schools and even download a list of those schools that met that criteria. So like the report, you can also download this as an image to use in a grant application, a presentation, or any other document or report you're working on. And you can do that with the export menu here. So let's see, I'm just taking a quick look at the chat here to make sure I'm on time. So we do have the location here where you can download a map title as well as download this as an image or a PDF. So those are the quick resources that I just wanted to point out on the Commons. Also, just so you know, we do have a search area where you can search if there's any particular topic that interests you. And I'm going to go ahead and stop here and turn it over to Paul, but if there are any additional questions, I can answer those during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Erin. That was very cool. Let's see here. So my name is Paul Mackey. I'm Communications Director at Mobility Lab. We're based in Arlington County, Virginia. We get most of our funding from Arlington County, but we look at transportation behavior throughout the country and the world. And this is really important because a lot of people in the transportation world talk about infrastructure needs. We focus less on that and more on transportation behavior. For instance, I wrote an article for our blog a week or two ago that was all about Palo Alto, which has been named the smartest city in California, but 19% of people surveyed there in 2015 don't know how to ride the bus. So that tells us we have our work cut out for us to educate people about transportation options. I want to talk for just a few minutes about big data means everything or nothing. And I want to talk about the big opportunities that we have to find champions to make big data work for smart routes to school. Think of our mindset in the United States. We put in all kinds of new infrastructure when the time comes to host a Super Bowl or an Olympics, but at most schools across the country, we continue to look away with no planning or thought or whatsoever, and we force kids year after year to enter and exit strictly by bus or car to our schools. One way to attempt to change this is by taking the bike walk movement guerrilla style to the streets, and the bicycle advocacy group Bike Easy did this before the 2013 Super Bowl in New Orleans. They painted temporary bike lanes before the city had completed street improvements. You see that on the left side there of your screen. And they demanded streets that work for all users. That actually worked because New Orleans then laid more than double the planned amount of bike lanes as they finished off that project before the Super Bowl to get it easier to get to the Super Bowl for people. But most existing schools somehow don't have the buy-in from planners who often are more concerned about the buildings themselves rather than how the buildings connect with the surrounding landscape. From teachers and staff who often say that they need to carry too much material to bike or walk or take transit, and transit is so often not that accessible even if they wanted to take it, meaning the issue isn't particularly on top of their priorities. And it's not as much buy-in from parents either who, if you've ever known any parents, it's not like they don't have enough to do already, but usually they don't have children in any one particular school for more than a few years, so the time investment may not be worth the effort to get the safe routes in. So how do we make it easier to walk and bike to schools, gaining all the societal positives it would bring? One major answer could be big data and the ways we can become so much smarter when we build our neighborhoods around what we learn from it. 5 years ago, we didn't have all the smartphone data or Waze on our phones or Google's Sidewalk Labs that is tracking how people move about places now in New York City, for instance. Governments and businesses now have access to that information, and so there should never be another bridge to nowhere like you see in the picture. That happened in the mid-2000s in Alaska. Decisions about which projects to fund have to be made on the facts, and nowadays spending $400 million on a pork barrel bridge that carries less than 100 people a day would not and absolutely should not happen. In another recent article that I wrote at mobilitylab.org, I quoted Tyler Duvall of McKinsey & Company on the use of big data, and he said it's a big departure from where we were many, many years ago when it was largely an engineering decision. People were drawing maps, and it was unrelated to demand or to planning or economics or technology. Of course, leaving decisions strictly to the public and private sectors may not exactly be the answer either. If it were, then safe routes would be the norm. And so I want to talk about champions that are needed. And some of the most promising champions that Mobility Lab has seen have been citizens, hackers, writers, and others who know how to take big data and turn it into compelling stories, much like, you know, we saw some of that from Aaron in the presentation before, taking that data and turning it into something that people can create actionable pilot projects or advocacy, or that eventually turns into funding and policies. So some champions are hackers. We have a group at Mobility Lab that we started called Transportation Techies. It was founded 2.5 years ago by a true champion, our own Michael Shade. And since then, it's held 30 monthly show and tell events in which hackers, many who don't have huge computer skills and just regular citizens, they'll take data and they'll display it as visualizations, or they'll discuss trends in people movement that they've discovered by digging into that open transit data feeds. And Transportation Techies is working. This is a picture from the Washington Post, which covered it. And one of our recent Metro Hack Nights was held at Washington, D.C., WMATA Metro headquarters. So Metro's listening. Well, Techies in 2.5 years has grown to 1,700 members, and that's just a DC-based group. So who knew there were 1,700 transportation techies in the Washington, D.C. area alone? And I think that suggests that there could be transportation techie meetups just about anywhere. You know, there are probably safe routes geek meetups that could be happening and may be happening anywhere. And that could mean more data turned into stories, which could mean action from that data. Champions can also be friends and family. These days, most people don't really know how long biking or walking to school will take, or what kind of barriers or variables might go into navigating the landscapes outside of the confines of getting to school in their own personal car or their parents' car or the bus. But there's something any towns or individual schools or groups can organize, and there's something called radius rides. Mobility Lab contributor Randy Cole wrote in his article a while back, these are organized events in which a group of cyclists starting from the same location, like a high school parking lot, library, or shopping center, take routes away from there. This actual ride data is then valuable for showing the local public how far one can get on a bike in 5, 10, or 15-minute intervals from the selected starting point. The rides are relaxed speed group rides, not races, and they're for the purpose of recording data to plot our maps. Now, Michael Shade, who I mentioned before of our Techies group, took the data from one that was a radius ride that was done in Alexandria, Virginia, just south of DC, and turned it into a full motion graphic, which could then be communicated understandably in a way people would understand. And this effort had the added benefit of showing that bicycling for everyday trips and errands is often the best transportation option by many measures. Along with cool graphics, this kind of fact-finding is invaluable for messaging, marketing, and advocacy purposes. Another kind of champions are bearers of excellent information. Transit Screen, which you see those two people looking at there on the sidewalk, it was born as part of Mobility Lab's Tech Fellowship program in 2011, and it was one of our first projects as an organization, and it's come a long way in the marketplace. They expect to have screens and displays in 5,000 locations in 40 cities across 10 countries and in 10 languages by the end of this year. So even in a world where we have so much transportation information on our smartphones and real-time information like this on a billboard-like display setting, it's often in lobbies when you enter hotels or restaurants. This kind of display can be crucial in getting people trained to think about their many options that they might have besides the drive-alone trip. And that kind of brain training will get school kids practicing active transportation. And wouldn't a transit screen in every school be great for helping kids hop on the subway or bike share or the city bus on their way home as an option? And then over here on the right side, on the bottom, there's transit agencies are also need to get better, and we need to partner with them to get better. They need to be better designers. We need to push them to use designs everyone can understand and use, even children can understand. This Metrobus information, the Metrobus information in Washington, D.C. is just awful. If you try to catch a bus, you have to ride the 31 to the 33 to the what does it all mean? And recently there was an article in Greater Washington, it's a blog in Washington, D.C., where designer Todd Fisk offered free advice and this design to the agency to show, a little bit more the way people think about how they might get around town. And I think that's valuable kind of information that we can train our brains with to become better transportation users. And last, I just want to say champions can be partners. All of what I've said before sort of had the halls of power outside of the equation, but it's ideal when real champions eventually wind up including the top influencers. In Arlington County, where we're based, the public schools are working with county employees and the transit agency's Commuter Bureau on a transportation demand management plan for the schools. And this is a first-of-its-kind program in the country. A report that fully outlines this TDM plan it's going to be released really soon. It's going to, as you see, there's draft on the bottom of these pages here, so I can't share a whole lot, but it will feature a lot of survey information showing biking, walking, driving rates, along with data on the number of active transportation programs at all Arlington public schools. And the report will also include relatively aggressive targets for improvement by 2021. And as noted, to echo everyone, the recent Safe Routes to School report by the numbers is excellent. And the report I love the report's highlight of several excellent projects around the country. But we all know these are still too often the exceptions. Lots still needs to be done, and schools shouldn't be built at the end of highways, and strong infrastructure like protected bike lanes should connect communities to their schools, and parents should understand that driving their kids to school every day isn't necessarily the best decision for anyone. So open, accessible data, it's a major path for making students' routes to school more safe. And even perhaps equally or more important, it brings a little bit of the fun back to the school commute. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we should all be in this for, is to remember what it was like when we went to school in a way in the so-called old days. It was fun going to school. It wasn't always so stressful. So as I said, I wrote a couple blogs before. I'll probably write a blog on this presentation, so you can see that up on mobilitylab.org pretty soon. And thank you so much for having me and listening in, everybody.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to talk to you today about a collaborative project that I helped coordinate involving the NADWay of Central Alabama, where I work, in partnership with the City of Birmingham, Birmingham City Schools, and the Regional Planning Commission to create new safe walking maps. To take you through that, first I'm going to talk about the background of the project, the purpose of creating the method we used, and also the roles and responsibilities of each party. And then we'll have a very brief conclusion. As background, previously the City of Birmingham provided hand-drawn paper-based maps like the one you see here for Robinson Elementary. These maps noted directional routes, and as you can imagine, were pretty time-intensive to make and update, as well as costly to distribute. So in response, the purpose of our project became to improve the safety of students who walk and bike to school through the creation of these new maps. And specifically for our project, we looked at the 2-mile radius around schools. We chose this boundary because this is the area that does not have busing within the Birmingham City School District. And we found in some school zones as many as 20 to 25% of households do not own an automobile. So students are walking out of necessity. So we wanted to improve their safety, obviously when they're out increasing their own physical activity for health, but most importantly from a transportation equity perspective. The method we used to improve these maps was to utilize modern technology, in this case tablets and ArcGIS software, specifically the ArcGIS Collector app, to create the new maps. For modeling, we referenced the school travel plans created by several entities, including other regional planning commissions, but specifically the Active Transportation Alliance in Chicago. And I had the pleasure and want to thank Melody Geraci from the Active Transportation Alliance for her technical assistance and guidance on this project as we networked during the CPPW grant previously, and that really spurred the project even though that was years ago. So to accomplish this project, we had a lot of people from those other organizations I mentioned involved who contributed their time. Some just contributed periodic assistance to help us keep the project moving at the city. So I can't stress how important this teamwork was, though, in getting this project going and completed and where it is today. So thank you to all those listed and others who have helped. Also, for funding support, we have benefited from CDC's REACH initiatives, as well as funding through the Regional Planning Commission. So in regards to those partners and the roles that each performed, the primary role of myself in conjunction with Mike Kazarowski at Regional Planning Commission was coordinating the overall project with the city and the Birmingham City Schools. We actually came up with the funding to purchase the 5-user pack for ArcGIS subscriptions, purchase the iPads, which traffic engineering has used for their field collection, and also once the project has progressed, we've assisted in the dissemination and awareness of the new maps. So from the city's perspective, they had 3 departments involved, Information Management Systems, GIS Department, and Traffic Engineering. Information Management Systems really helped us launch the project by contributing some iPad tablets from within their inventory to pilot the project, and then once everything was worked out, then that's when we stepped in and actually funded the purchase of new tablets to proceed with the project ongoing. GIS obviously had a major role in this project to set up the project in ArcGIS so that traffic engineering could respond to prompts in the field, which helped made the data collection uniform. Also, they trained traffic engineering staff on using the technology. And of course, after traffic engineering collects the data in the field, it's sent to the cloud and on to GIS to update layers, maps, and also for further data analyzation. As I mentioned, traffic engineering initially worked with GIS on the project setup, and now traffic engineering has integrated the data collection into their normal field operations. The new data that is specifically being collected as part of this project includes the location of crosswalks, traffic signals, and all-way stops, school and pedestrian signage, crossing signals, and the location of school crossing guards, which this was another interesting development of the project, which we found that traffic engineering actually funds the placement of school crossing guards, even though the school district is responsible for hiring and maintaining the employment of the crossing guards. So this was a new relationship that actually progressed from this discussion, which has led to some more positive results recently as well. So the new data collection and the new data was overlaid with existing GIS layers. So that all came together to create the new map. And as you can see here, there's a before and an after. The map on the left is the original map of Robinson Elementary, which you saw at the beginning of the presentation, and the new map on the right. You can see that in addition to showing more layers of information, the new map is easier to update and more part of a process at traffic engineering. Also, the map is easier to share and reproduce. So in conclusion, I'd like to look at the 6 E's of safe routes and how they apply to this project. But I am actually going to let you read that on your own as I turn it back over to Sarah for Q&A. So thank you very much.
Hello again, everybody. Thanks so much for all of those great presentations, Erin, Paul, and Nick. We are running right out of time for Q&A, but I think we have time for one question. So, so let's jump in with one that came up that I think people might have some interest in and good examples of. This is a question about how to protect student data and addresses while also trying to openly share data with other agencies. The questioner was saying that they have some legal concerns about releasing geocoded student points. And I think this kind of gets to the bigger question about how do you, what kind of approaches exist for addressing privacy concerns but still maximizing data use. So if any of the speakers would like to jump in on that, please do.
This is Michelle, and I'll jump in kind of from what we saw as we were developing the report from kind of information provided by communities on what they were doing. So some of them were asking not necessarily for the specific addresses, but asking for schools or school districts to kind of provide information about generally where students were located, and whether that being, be providing them with a dot like at the closest intersection to the address, or somehow kind of pulling away from the providing very specifics, but still to kind of get a general sense of where students were located, and really the routes that would be most important, or the areas that would be most important to look at.
And this is Paul. Just to add to that, with the radius rides that I mentioned, the onus there works on the community builds the data based on what the geography of the town or neighborhood is like, and then that information is then shared back as a whole, so that individuals at the school, teachers or parents or whoever it is, can then map out their particular specifics based on what the radius ride data is showing. So that's one way around having to collect student addresses.
All right. Well, that is probably all we really have time for, but sounds like some really good approaches for obscuring the precise aspects of individual student data while still getting the kind of gist of what the data is showing out there. So with that, we need to wrap up. Thank you so much to all of today's speakers. That was really incredible. Let me just give us a couple other things that we want to make sure that you know about. As I mentioned before, this webinar is going to be posted online within 48 hours, so feel free to go and refer friends to it or colleagues, or refer to it again yourself. Of course, we're also going to be sending out a very quick survey right after this webinar, and we'd love your feedback. It really helps us make our future webinars even better. And I also want to encourage you to go ahead and register for our next webinar if this topic is of interest to you. We're going to be delving in on youth engagement and how kids can affect community policy programs and planning. That's going to be August 24th at 10 p.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and all other times in between. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We really appreciated it and hope you really learned something.